Tim Tyson is an American writer and historian from North Carolina.
You know, Mike has a beautiful artistry of taking scholarship and making it a walk and talk and giving it magic, really. I can only say magic. I don't know what other word to use, but I like it better than the movie. I like it better than the book. But the way that Mike in all of these plays goes through real, historical sources such as people like me use, but he threads the needle through them and makes it into a story that coheres and is the heart of the matter. I loved the production in fact, all the productions that I've seen at Temple Theater, but that was a particularly strong one, the one I attended there, the showing of blood, and with my father and my mother and some other members of my family. And that engagement with the audience is just inherent to his way of doing things. So anyway, I'm really proud to work with him.
You need to know how the collaboration came about. See, is big. I would, and this is just one of my favorite Tim and Mike stories. I was performing Darhi, my Emmett Till play, at Deep Dish Theater in Chapel Hill. In the process leading up to that, I was writing the play. And I remember one day riding along, and Melinda Pincava had Tim and his dad on the state of things, and they were talking about the story, and I was immediately rapt. I was listening to them, and then I realized, oh no, this is going to affect how I tell the Emmett Till story when I listen. So I had to turn it off. So sometime later, probably a few months, there I was performing it in Chapel Hill. And after the performance, I'd like to talk to audience members and have a Q&A and all that. And a mutual friend said, you need to show this play to Tim Tyson. And I knew the name. I knew the book. But it sounded to me in the same way that people will say to me after a performance, you need to talk to Oprah. And so my stock answer, I typically will say, that's great. Do you have Oprah's number? And they usually say, no, I don't have Oprah's number. And I go, well, then I can't really talk to her because I don't have a number. Well, when I said, that's really great. Do you have Tim's number? And she said, yes, I do. Here you go. And she wrote it down and she gave it to me. So she called my bluff. And I'm, well, I got to call him now, right? So the next day, I called Tim, and he was in Wisconsin, and he said, and you must have been riding your convertible, because it sounded like this. It sounded like, yeah, man, I've heard about you. I'm coming to see you next week. I'm going to bring some family. And I said, okay, that's great. So he had already heard about me. And so Tim came to see the performance. And afterwards he talked. And then he said, I'm going to come back next week. So he came back again. This time he brought even more people. And afterwards we sat and chatted, and that night he said, okay, when you perform my book, when you adapt my book. And I said, and he was so excited about it. And I said, I'm sorry, I haven't read your book. And this is how I knew that we were, we had been brothers from another life, right? That because we had the same sense of humor. Because he looked at me and goes, that's okay, I haven't either. And so we began to collaborate, and obviously the first thing I did was read the book, and I was blown away by it. And the reason that there were a few reasons, because it was a story that I hadn't heard before, right? Of course, But there are plenty of stories that I haven't heard before. But he has a way of taking you down a rabbit hole. Like, here's the greater story, but let me tell you how this story is connected to all of these other stories. So he'll take you down this amazing rabbit hole and connect everything, and you come back out knowing so much more, not just about the story that he is telling, right? Not just that story, but you have a proper context of why this story, why that is so important, and how that could possibly have happened because of all this interconnected muscle tissue. I just ate it up. It was just so beautifully told, and yet it was history. It was the most beautiful form of storytelling, right? Through documentary history that I had come across. So, but the things that Eddie and those other folks did, I hadn't come across a story. I hadn't told that story. I hadn't had an opportunity to tell that kind of story. So all of that, and the fact that Tim found ways to incorporate humor in it, that's what gets it. That's what sends it to the vein. Because if you're laughing about something, it's really hard. It's really hard to push it away, right? You're doing more pulling it to you when you're laughing. So it had all of those elements, and to top it off, you asked me a little while ago about my own childhood, right? To top it off, it had an element to it when it comes to Tim the person, and when I look at my own life, of that he shouldn't be here, right? Out of all the things and all the places and all the starts and stops to starting college, to dropping out of college, all the places in Wilmington and so on and so forth, that Tim has been, in the way that I grew up. And I look at people that I grew up with and I think, oh, but given the way that he grew up and given the way I grew up, I look at that and I go, out of all the things that happen in our lifetimes, the fact that we are still here to be able to tell the story, right? We have lived to tell the story. That's amazing. That is amazing. So we're here to tell the story. And so I'm here to tell the story.
Who tells your story?